My name is Patricia Vance, and I turned 62 years old on the very night my future daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eye and told me I smelled like poverty and failure. It was 11 p.m. on a Tuesday in San Francisco. I was shivering on the sidewalk, freezing rain soaking into my bones, clutching a black garbage bag filled with a few old clothes. Meanwhile, Amber stood in the doorway of the luxury condo, the one I had secretly paid for, looking at me with pure disgust, as if I were a parasite. She had finally scraped off her shoe. She snatched my flip phone, my only means of communication, and smashed it onto the wet concrete. The plastic shattered with a dry crack that echoed through the rain. "Do us a favor, Patricia," she sneered. Wearing that half-smile she usually reserved for waitstaff, she refused to tip. "Go find a homeless shelter. You're ruining the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Don't come back until you learn how not to be a burden." The door slammed shut. The lock clicked like a nail being driven into a coffin. She thought I was just a useless, retired widow from rural Ohio with barely $800 in her savings account. She thought I was a senile, country bumpkin leeching off my son's kindness. She was wrong, dead wrong. What Amber didn't know was that the aesthetic she worshipped, the tech industry she was desperately trying to break into, was built on my code and my billions. She had just evicted the chairman of the very venture capital firm she would be begging for money the next morning. Before I tell you about the sweet revenge that took place in a glass-walled boardroom the very next day, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you hate bullies and respect your elders. Let me know in the comments, have you ever been underestimated just because of how you looked? To understand why I let myself fall this low, soaked, humiliated by a girl young enough to be my granddaughter, I need to take you back to where it started. 30 years ago, I wasn't Mom. I was Patricia Vance, known as the Iron Lady of Silicon Valley. I built Vance Ventures from a dusty garage into a financial fortress that controlled the cash flow of billion-dollar apps. I was the woman who made CEOs bow their heads when I entered the room. I was sharp, cold, and ruthless. But the cost was Mark, my son. I sent him to the most expensive boarding schools on the East Coast so I could attend board meetings on the West Coast. I missed his first soccer game to close a merger. I missed his graduation to handle a PR crisis. I bought him everything he wanted, except the one thing he needed, my presence. 5 years ago, a massive stroke nearly killed me at my desk. When I woke up in the ICU surrounded by expensive orchids and generic get-well cards from partners. No one was holding my hand. Mark didn't come. He just sent a short, cold voicemail. In that moment, I realized I had billions in the bank, but I was the poorest woman on earth. I decided to disappear. I handed control to my trusted partners and became a ghost. I found Mark in San Francisco, where he was working as a modest programmer, but I didn't go as Patricia Vance, the billionaire. I went as a failed mother who had lost everything in a Ponzi scheme, left with nothing but the proceeds from selling her small house back home. Why did I lie? Because I needed to know if my son could love me for me, or if he would only come back for the ATM machine. Mark took me in. He was still angry, still distant, but he had a good heart. He cleared out the guest room, bought me warm sweaters, and patiently taught me how to use Netflix. We started to heal. Quiet dinners, awkward but real conversations. I started to feel happy, a simple happiness money couldn't buy. And then Amber walked in. Amber entered Mark's life like a tropical storm, flashy but destructive. She called herself a visionary CEO, building a sustainable fashion startup called EcoChic. From the moment we met, when Mark introduced me, "This is my mom. She's going to stay with us for a while." I saw Amber's eyes scan me like a barcode reader. She looked at my worn canvas shoes, my outdated cardigan, and my messy gray bun. She didn't see a person. She saw a liability, an obstacle, trash that needed to be taken out. "Oh," she said, her voice sweet but her eyes ice cold. "That's nice. But honey, this condo is a bit tight for 3 people, and I'm very sensitive to the smell of old people. They say, if you throw a frog in boiling water, it jumps out. But if you heat the water slowly, it dies without noticing." Amber was heating the pot, and I was the frog. Or so she thought. The first week I moved in, Amber kept up a polite facade in front of Mark. But the moment Mark left for work, her true face appeared. "Hey, Patricia." She never called me Mom or Mrs. Vance. That guest room. I need it for my office. My startup is in a critical fundraising phase. I need creative space. I didn't argue. Playing the role of the destitute mother, I nodded. "Okay. Where should I sleep?" "The living room sofa is perfectly soft." She pointed without looking at me. So, the woman who owned vacation villas in the Hamptons and Malibu was now curling up under a thin blanket on a lumpy couch, smelling leftover takeout. But that was just the start. Slowly, she turned me into an unpaid maid. "Patricia, steam this dress. Don't burn it. It costs more than your life." "Patricia, pack these sample boxes. Your hands are wrinkled, but you can still tape a box, right?" "Patricia, walk the dog and pick up the poop. Don't let the neighbors judge us." You might ask, where was Mark? Why didn't he protect his mother? Mark. My poor son. He was a talented programmer, but in love, he was blind and weak. Amber manipulated him with beauty and promises of a wealthy future. Whenever Mark came home, Amber flipped a switch. She'd hug me, pretending to massage my shoulders. "Mom, Patricia helped me so much today, babe. She's such an angel." And when I tried to talk to Mark privately, he would sigh. "Mom, Amber is under a lot of pressure. Her startup is her dream. Please, just bear with it. For me." For me. Those 2 words were chains binding me. I had abandoned him in the past. I had no right to ruin his present happiness. I bit my tongue, telling myself this was my penance. Living with Amber gave me a front-row seat to her business empire. With 30 years of VC experience, I smelled a scam instantly. Her sustainable fashion was blatant greenwashing. She imported cheap polyester clothes from overseas, cut out the tags, sewed in eco-chic, 100% organic cotton labels, and sold them at a 500% markup. She spent all day taking selfies, writing hollow speeches on LinkedIn about saving the planet, while the plastic waste from her packaging piled up in our hallway. I watched her lie to small investors over the phone. I watched her use Mark's credit card to buy designer handbags, claiming they were marketing expenses. One Saturday morning, Mark was gone. Amber was at the dining table, furiously typing on her laptop. I brought her a latte as she demanded. My hand trembled slightly, a lingering effect of my stroke, and a few drops of coffee spilled onto the saucer. Amber jumped up like she'd been electrocuted. She swiped her hand, knocking the hot coffee all over my old sweater. "You idiot!" she screamed, her beautiful face twisted in rage. "Can't you do anything right? You senile old hag! Do you know how important my work is?" I stood there, hot coffee burning my skin, dabbing the stain with a rag. I looked up, straight into her eyes. For a split second, the Iron Lady peeked through, the look that used to make competitors crumble. Amber froze, sensing a danger she couldn't understand. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice low and cold, hiding my authority. "I'll clean it up." Just get out of my sight, she muttered, turning back to her screen. Her arrogance returning. You kill my vibe. She didn't know that right then. I wasn't afraid. I was calculating. I was analyzing risk, and I was waiting for a fatal error. And that error was about to happen. Living under the same roof, I watched my son wither away. Mark, once vibrant, now came home with hollow eyes and slumped shoulders. He worked 14-hour days at his software job, only to come home to Amber complaining about her vision and unpaid bills. One night, Mark fell asleep at the dinner table from exhaustion. I gently put a blanket over him. Amber walked by and scoffed. He's so weak. If he wants to be the husband of a successful CEO, he needs to hustle harder. Stop babying him. Patricia. I clenched my fists. I wanted to scream that Mark was carrying this entire household, but I held back. I needed more evidence. I needed Mark to see her true face himself. I knew she was desperate. Her startup was burning cash with zero revenue. Banks had rejected her loans. Mark's credit cards were maxed out. She was cornered, and cornered people do stupid things. That afternoon, I overheard Amber on the phone in her office. Her voice was shaky but greedy. Don't worry, I'll have the money. I just secured a pitch meeting with Vance Ventures for Wednesday morning. Yes, the biggest fund in the city. I need proof of assets to show liquidity. Don't worry, I have collateral. My heart stopped. Vance Ventures? My company? Fate has a twisted sense of humor. She was going to beg for money from the very firm I owned. But what worried me was the word collateral. She didn't own anything that night. While Amber slept and Mark was still at work, I crept into her office, buried under a pile of fashion magazines. I found a leather folder. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. It was a mortgage application for this condo, Mark's only home, a predatory loan with an insane interest rate. And, at the bottom, the signature, Mark Daniel. But it wasn't Mark's signature. The lines were shaky, a clumsy forgery. Amber had forged Mark's signature to mortgage our home, just to get cash to dress up her portfolio for the investors at Vance Ventures. She wasn't just scamming me. She was about to put my son on the street. My limit was reached. The patient mother died in that moment now. Only Patricia Vance remained, the protector. The next day was Tuesday. It rained from dawn, signaling a chaotic night. Mark called to say he was working late. I knew this was my only chance to stop Amber before she filed those papers in the morning. 10 p.m. Amber was frantically trying on outfits for her big pitch at Vance Ventures. I walked into the living room, holding the forged folder. Amber, I said. My voice didn't have the tremor of age anymore. It was steel. She turned, annoyed. What? I'm busy. I threw the folder onto the coffee table. The slap of paper against glass was loud. You cannot do this. This is fraud. And more importantly, this is Mark's home. Amber's face went pale, then red. She lunged, grabbing the folder. You! How dare you snoop through my things, you rat! I'm calling Mark, I said, reaching for my flip phone. I'm telling him how you're selling him out. Amber tackled me like a wild animal. She snatched the phone, her eyes manic. You think Mark will believe you? She laughed, a sound bordering on insanity. I am his future. You are rotting past. I need this money. Tomorrow is my shot at Vance Ventures. This is my destiny. No senile old woman is going to stand in my way. Vance Ventures will never fund a fraud, I said, locking eyes with her. I guarantee it. That sentence was the spark in the powder keg. Amber grabbed my thin arm, her nails digging into my skin. Fine. If you want to sabotage me, do it from the street. She dragged me to the door. I tried to hold on to the frame, But a 62-year-old woman is no match for a young woman fueled by adrenaline and greed. She threw my garbage bag of clothes into the hallway. Then she shoved me, hard. I fell onto the cold, wet concrete outside. The rain stung my face. "Get out!" she screamed, her voice echoing. "Get out of our lives. And remember, you're a failure because you're poor. In this world, if you have no money, you aren't human." The door slammed. I sat there, in the freezing San Francisco rain, discarded. But as the rain washed away the shock, something else rose up. I looked up at the black sky. "You're right, Amber," I whispered. "In this world, money is power. And you just made the biggest mistake of your life. You woke up the monster." I stood up, shaking, and walked to a payphone on the corner. I found a loose quarter in my pocket. I took a deep breath, shedding the skin of the poor mother. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years, but knew by heart. 2 rings. A deep, professional voice answered. "Office of the Chairman, Vance Ventures." "Sebastian," I said. My voice was no longer weak. It rang with authority. Silence on the other end. Then a gasp. "Chairman? Patricia? Is that you?" "Prepare the boardroom for 8 a.m., I commanded. "Summon the entire board and send a car for me, now." "Yes, ma'am. Where are you?" "I'm at rock bottom." I looked at my reflection in a puddle. "But tomorrow, I'm taking back the throne. And Sebastian, make sure the file for EcoChic is on my desk. I want to handle this one personally." I hung up. I was cold, but I was burning with rage. Tomorrow, Amber was going to learn what Business 4.0 really meant. 15 minutes after the call, a sleek black Bentley tore through the rain and pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out with a large umbrella, bowing respectfully. But the man who stepped out from the back seat was the one who nearly made me cry. Sebastian, my right-hand man for 20 years. He looked at me, Patricia Vance, once a titan of industry, now soaked like a stray dog, shivering in muddy clothes. There was no pity in his eyes, only suppressed fury. He took off his cashmere coat and draped it over my shoulders. "The car is warm, ma'am." His voice cracked slightly. "Let's take you home." "Not home, Sebastian," I said, sliding into the leather seat. "Take me to the Four Seasons and call my old styling team. I need them there in 30 minutes. Tomorrow morning, the Patricia Vance everyone fears needs to return." That night, in the presidential suite, I stood under a scalding shower for an hour. I scrubbed my skin raw, washing away the dirt, the humiliation, and the weakness of the last few months. When I stepped out, the team was waiting. They dyed my gray hair, styling it back into my signature sharp bob. They applied makeup to hide the dark circles from months of sleeping on a sofa. I slipped into a vintage cream Chanel suit, the color of purity, but also of ice. I strapped on my Patek Philippe watch, which had been sitting in a bank vault for 5 years. When I looked in the mirror, poor Patricia was gone. The Iron Lady was back. "Are you ready?" Sebastian asked. "No," I said, my eyes sharp. "One thing is missing." I picked up the investigation file on Amber that Sebastian had just delivered. "Now, I'm ready." Wednesday morning. The sun rose over the skyscrapers of San Francisco. At the condo, I knew Amber was preparing. I could imagine her yelling at Mark for tying his tie wrong or forcing him to rehearse his lines. She thought she had disposed of her burden last night. She thought she would walk into Vance Ventures and walk out with $1 million check. She didn't know she was walking into a slaughterhouse, and the butcher was sitting at the head of the table. 8:30 a.m. My car pulled into the private underground garage of Vance Tower. I took the private elevator to the 40th floor, the executive level. Mrs. Vance, the receptionist, who had been with me for 15 years, gasped when the doors opened. She started to cheer, but I put a finger to my lips. "Are they here?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am. Ms. Amber and Mark are in the waiting room. She's quite rude. She yelled at the barista for using the wrong sugar." I smiled faintly. "Let her enjoy her last moments of arrogance. Show them to Boardroom 1. I'll watch from the control room." Boardroom 1 was a masterpiece of intimidation. A massive mahogany table, surrounded by glass walls overlooking the bay. My 4 senior partners sat there, stone-faced, like statues of judgment. They had been briefed. Through the security camera monitor in my private office, I watched the doors open. Amber walked in. She was wearing a dress with a slit that was far too high, too flashy for a serious pitch. She walked with the confidence of someone who had never hit a wall. Chin high, heels clicking on the marble. Trailing behind her was Mark. My son looked broken. He kept his head down, clutching a binder, looking less like a co-founder and more like a prisoner of war. "Gentlemen," Amber started, not even bowing. "I am Amber, CEO of EcoChic, and I am here to offer you the chance to invest in the next unicorn." My partners didn't respond. Sebastian, sitting at the vice chair, simply nodded. "Proceed." Amber launched into her pitch. She flashed slides on the screen. The numbers danced. 300% growth, 50% margins, 100% organic sourcing from sustainable farms in Peru. I sat in the dark room, watching the lies. Farms in Peru was actually a sweatshop in Guangzhou. 300% growth was her buying her own inventory with Mark's credit cards. "Impressive," Sebastian interrupted as Amber rambled about saving the earth. "But, Ms. Amber, our due diligence shows your cash flow is negative. How do you explain the $800,000 mortgage loan taken out yesterday? Is that equity or bad debt?" Amber froze. Her face twitched. She shot a nervous glance at Mark, then recovered her fake smile. That is committed family capital," she lied smoothly. "My fiancé, Mark, believes in this project so much he invested his personal assets." She turned to Mark, her eyes sharp as daggers. "Right, honey?" Mark trembled, sweat beading on his forehead. He opened his mouth, then looked down. "Yes, that's right." My heart broke. My son had been manipulated into selling his own soul. "Interesting," Sebastian said, his voice sharpening. "But we have a rule at Vance Ventures. We never make a final decision without the chairman's approval." Amber raised an eyebrow, annoyed. "The chairman? I thought you were the decision makers. I don't have all day." "Oh, our chairman is very interested in this project." Sebastian smiled, a dangerous glint in his eye. "She has been watching you very closely. And she is here right now." Sebastian stood up. The other 3 partners stood up in unison, buttoning their jackets, bowing their heads toward the double doors at the end of the room. The air in the room grew heavy. Amber looked around, confused. Why were these powerful men standing up with such reverence? The double doors slowly swung open. I walked in. No limp, no coffee stains. I walked with the stride of a queen returning to her court. The sound of my heels on the floor was rhythmic, deliberate, like the ticking of a bomb. I walked past Mark. He looked up, and his eyes went wide. He dropped his binder. "Mom?" he whispered, disbelieving. I didn't stop. I walked straight to the leather chair at the head of the table. I spun it around, sat down, interlaced my fingers, and placed them on the table. Then I looked up, straight at Amber. She stood frozen. Her jaw dropped. All the blood drained from her face. She looked at the Chanel suit, the styled hair, and finally, into my eyes. The eyes of the woman she had called a failure just last night. "Good morning, Amber," I said, my voice ice cold, filling the silent room. "You said you hate the smell of old people and failure. Tell me, what do you smell now? The smell of power, or the smell of the end?" Amber stood paralyzed. Her eyes darted from me to the partners, then to the door, looking for an escape route. "Patricia," she stammered, her voice pitching up in panic. "What? What the hell are you doing here? The janitor's entrance is downstairs. Security. Why are you letting this crazy woman sit in the chairman's chair?" She turned to Sebastian, screaming, "Do something! She's my fiancé's mooching mother." Sebastian didn't speak. He just adjusted his glasses and looked at her like she was a bug on a windshield. "Amber," I spoke. My voice was low, rolling like thunder. "Sit down." It wasn't a request. It was a command backed by 30 years of empire building. Amber's knees buckled. She fell into the chair, gripping the edge of the mahogany table. "You are standing in Vance Tower," I said slowly, enunciating every syllable. "You are pitching to Vance Ventures. Did you never wonder where the name Vance came from? Or were you too busy treating my son like an accessory, and his mother like a slave, to notice the last name on his driver's license?" Amber's face turned from white to gray. The realization began to seep into her ambitious brain. Mark Vance. Patricia Vance. "No, impossible," she whispered. "You said you were poor. You tricked me." "I didn't trick you," I replied. "I just didn't tell you I was rich, and that silence revealed your true character. You don't love my son. You love the lifestyle you imagined he could provide." I picked up her eco-chic portfolio. "Now, let's talk business." I flipped the pages. The sound of paper was deafening in the quiet room. Growth numbers. Fabricated. No auditor has signed off on this. Sourcing. Fraudulent. You import fashion waste and label it eco-friendly. But I paused, pulling out the mortgage document I had stolen the night before. "This is the real crime." I slid the paper across the table. "Forging a signature to mortgage a property you don't own. Amber, this isn't just bad business ethics. This is a felony. I could call the police right now and have you arrested for grand larceny and fraud." Amber stared at the paper, then at Mark. Mark was staring at his own forged signature, his eyes red with shock and betrayal. "Patricia." "Mom." Amber switched tactics instantly. She started to cry, crocodile tears she had perfected. "I'm sorry. I was just under so much pressure. I wanted to succeed for our family. I did it for Mark. Please forgive me." "Do not call me Mom." I cut her off. "And do not drag Mark into your filth." I stood up and walked to the trash can in the corner. I dropped her portfolio into it. "Vance Ventures declines to invest, but I'm not done." I turned to my partners. "Send a memo to every venture capital firm in Silicon Valley, New York, and London. Put Amber and EcoChic on the blacklist. If anyone funds her, Vance Ventures pulls our partnership with them." Amber let out a sound like a wounded animal. "You can't do that. You're killing my future." "You killed your future the moment you pushed me into the rain last night," I said coldly. "You underestimated an old woman. And now, that old woman is burying your career." Realizing her career was ashes, Amber dropped the innocent act. her face twisted into something ugly and primal. She whipped around to Mark, who was still sitting frozen. "Mark! Why are you just sitting there?" she shrieked. "Your mother is ruining me! What kind of man are you? Say something! Are you going to let this senile hag control your life?" Mark lifted his head. For the first time all morning, he looked at Amber. The love was gone. The fear was gone. Only disgust remained. I walked over to my son. I didn't touch him. He needed to stand on his own. "Mark," I said softly, "I'm sorry. I failed you as a mother when you were young. I wasn't there. And my absence left a hole that made you vulnerable to manipulators like her." I pointed a manicured finger at Amber. "But today, I am here. I won't force you. But here are the facts. She kicked me out on the street last night. She forged your signature to sell your home. She doesn't love you, Mark. She loves what she can take from you." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You can choose to walk out that door with her and lose everything. Or you can stay here, be the man I know you are, and let me help you rebuild. The choice is yours." The room held its breath. Amber glared at Mark. "Think carefully. Mark, if you leave me, you'll never find anyone as beautiful as me. And you'll always be a mama's boy." Mark stood up slowly. He towered over Amber. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The engagement ring. He had planned to propose officially tonight, after her funding was secured. Mark looked at the ring, then at Amber. "You're right. Amber," Mark said, his voice raspy but steady. "I was weak. I thought you were the light of my life." He threw the box onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped in front of her. "But that light was fake. You kicked my mother out? My mother, who cooked for you, cleaned for you? You did that to the woman who gave me life?" Amber stammered. I just—" "Shut up," Mark yelled, releasing months of suppressed anger. "You forged my signature? You were going to sell my house. You are a monster." Mark turned to me, tears in his eyes. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was blind." He turned back to Amber one last time. "Get out. I never want to see your face again." Amber lunged, trying to slap Mark. "You dare dump me? I'll sue you." But before she could touch him, two large security guards stepped out of the shadows. I had pressed the silent alarm minutes ago. "Let go of me! Do you know who I am?" Amber screamed as they dragged her toward the exit. "Yes," I called out. "You're an expensive lesson for my son. Goodbye, Amber." The doors shut, cutting off her screaming. The room fell silent. My partners quietly gathered their files and left, leaving us alone. Mark collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands, sobbing. I hugged my son, and for the first time in 30 years, I felt like a real mother. Not with money, but with protection. When the boardroom doors clicked shut behind Amber, a heavy silence settled over the room. No more screaming, no more lies, just the sound of Mark's ragged breathing. I sat beside him, rubbing his back in slow circles, just like I did when he was a boy with a scraped knee. Mark, a grown man of 30, leaned into me, trembling. "I'm so sorry. Mom," he wept. "I was so stupid. I let her humiliate you in our own home. I'm a terrible son." "No, Mark," I said, lifting his tear-stained face. "You aren't terrible. You have a kind heart, but you gave it to the wrong person, and I am to blame, too. I wasn't there to teach you how to spot a shark. Today, we learned that lesson together." That afternoon, we returned to the condo. It was a wreck, fabric scraps, stolen sketches, and Amber's expensive cosmetics were scattered everywhere. I reached for my phone to call a cleaning service, But Mark stopped me. "Let me do it," he said, his jaw set. "She brought this trash into our lives. I'm going to be the one to carry it out." I sat on the lumpy sofa, my bed for the last few months, and watched my son purge every trace of Amber. He threw everything into black bags, the clothes, the shoes, the fake happy photos. When Mark ripped the CEO Amber Eco-Chic sign off the guest room door and snapped it over his knee, I heard a sharp crack. It wasn't just plastic breaking. It was the sound of the chains falling off my son. As for Amber, justice didn't stop at the boardroom door. That same afternoon, Vance Ventures' legal team forwarded her fraudulent files to the authorities, with proof of the forged mortgage and the consumer fraud regarding her organic clothing. Amber wasn't just unemployed. She was facing 2 criminal lawsuits. Her bank accounts were frozen. The loan sharks she borrowed from came calling. I heard she had to sell her leased car and move in with an old friend, who kicked her out a week later for stealing jewelry. I didn't feel happy. I just felt sad. Sad for a young talent eaten alive by greed. But that is the cost of doing business with the devil. You reap what you sow. A week later, Mark handed in his resignation at his software company. "I want to work for you," he told me over dinner. "But not as a boss. I want to start at zero. I want to understand how you built this." I smiled, passing him a plate of ribs. "Deal, but I'm a tough boss. You start as a junior data analyst. Low pay, high pressure. Can you handle it?" "I can handle it," Mark replied, a new light in his eyes. "I'm Patricia Vance's son." We started over. No secrets. No lies. Mark moved into the main Vance estate with me, not to leech off me, but so we could make up for lost time. Every morning, we drive to work together. I teach him how to read people. He teaches me how to use the latest tech. I didn't just get my son back. I found a worthy successor. It has been 6 months since that rainy night. Today is Sunday. I'm sitting in my sun-drenched garden, watching Mark grill burgers in the corner. He's laughing with some old friends, good friends he reconnected with after dumping Amber. He looks healthy, confident, and at peace. I sip my tea, open my old journal, and write the final entry for this chapter of my life. My story might make you cheer because the villain got punished, but I want you to look deeper. I used to think money was everything. I spent my youth chasing it, thinking it would buy happiness for my son. I was wrong. Money is just a tool. Without love and guidance, money is just bait for predators like Amber. Amber failed not because she was poor. She failed because she valued people based on their net worth. She looked at my old sweater and saw trash. She didn't understand that a person's value lies in their wisdom, their experience, and their character. Things you can't see with the naked eye or measure with a bank balance. This is the message I want to send to the young people watching this. We, the older generation, might not know how to do a TikTok dance. We might type slowly. We might wear outdated clothes. But behind these wrinkles is a library of survival. We have fallen, fought, and won battles you haven't even imagined yet. The arrogance of youth is a double-edged sword. It helps you take risks, but if you lack humility and respect for those who came before you, it will destroy you. Amber lost because she thought she was smarter than an old lady. Don't make that mistake. And finally, family. I failed as a mother once. I used money to fill the void of my absence. The price was my son's distance. But it is never too late to fix it. If you are fighting with your parents or your children, remember this. When the storm comes, when the lovers leave, when society turns its back on you, who opens the door? Mark stood by me not because I was a billionaire. He didn't fully grasp it at that moment. but because he realized who actually loved him unconditionally. My name is Patricia Vance. I was called a failure. I was kicked out into the cold rain, but I stood up, not for revenge, but to protect what I love. I hope my story serves as a gentle reminder. Live authentically. Respect everyone, whether they arrive in a Bentley or a bus. And remember, the outer shell can deceive the eye, but time will always reveal who has true value. Thank you for listening to my story until the very end. If this story touched your heart, and if you believe that character counts more than cash, please type "real value" in the comments below. I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated? How did you handle it? Share your story so we can inspire each other. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next lesson life has to offer. Your support means the world to me. Goodbye, and see you next time.